calm for a second, take a breath.
Oh, yeah. First, energetic skill. Come back to your center. Deep breath in, maybe down into the ground. In the new book, I spend time at the beginning of each chapter taking people through the centering breath. The idea being you got to practice this stuff or it's not going to make much difference for you.
All right. Are you ready?
I am. Go ahead.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm so excited. Today I am fangirling because I have a guest on who is the author of a book that's had a really big impact on my own personal life, as well as the work that I do as a somatic love coach. Stephen Kessler has been a psychotherapist for 40 years, teaching locally and internationally. He's a certified EFT expert and training that's tapping, emotional freedom technique. And he's the best-selling author of the book, The 5 Personality Patterns, a simple, clear, true-to-life map of personality that gives you the key to understanding people and communicating with them effectively. He recently went even deeper into the material and wrote a second book, How to Have Better Relationships, which I'm really excited to talk to him about. Stephen loves teaching and helping people grow, and you can learn more about him at the number 5, personalitypatterns.com. So, Stephen, thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so I thought we could start by talking a little bit about your first book, The 5 Personality Patterns. Can you talk a little bit about what interested you and how you got into studying this material?
I've been sort of working the problem of what is going on with people since forever, it seems. When I was in high school, I both studied physics, which I loved, and did acting, which was tremendously helpful for me in kind of opening me up emotionally. And then when it was time to go to college, my parents kind of said, well, maybe you should lean into physics because, you get paid for that. So I did get into MIT to study physics, and I was there the first year. But during that year, I looked at me and the ways that I was sort of damaged by my East Coast American upbringing and tight as a drum. And I looked at the other people around me and I thought, if I stay here, this is not getting any better. So I transferred to acting school at Boston University and did 4 years there and then 4 years in a rep company. And it was finally in that third year in the rep company that my emotional life opened up again. So that was something I needed to do to make that happen. And then I really didn't quite know what to do with my life because I was never going to be a great actor. That was not the whole point. And I sort of drifted through things for a while until I got more and more interested in psychology and began studying that, came out here to California to do a master's in transpersonal psychology. And in that path began studying the Enneagram, which is a quite famous map of personality. And I was quite a student of the Enneagram for about 20 years. And that interest began to wane when I was introduced to the character structure map of personality, which is the one that I put into my book and called Personality Patterns. The character structure map seems to be actually more useful. It comes from what actually is going on in people rather than kind of being imposed from the outside in some way. So that's a little bit of how I got into this. And then when I looked around, when I've been studying the personality patterns for about 10 years, I realized there's almost no good material on this out there. So I tried to gather it together and pull it into a book, and that was where my book came from.
Yeah, I love how you've drawn on decades, if not more than a century, of existing research in personality and psychology, and yet what you came out with is really something fresh and updated and works in our modern world. So that must have been a really interesting process to get to this point.
This map has kind of been in the backwaters of psychology because it involves tracking how energy moves in a person. And modern talk therapy doesn't get into that at all. So it was a combination of the healers in the energy world and the psychology people that were working with this.
Yeah. So let's talk about the 5 personality patterns. And one of the things that you always say is that it's about how we learned how to survive, right? So let's talk about each pattern and how it has become a survival pattern inside someone.
Yeah, the easiest way, it seems, to understand these patterns and to learn about them is to understand the safety strategies that they're based on. I originally called those survival strategies. After publishing that first book, I decided safety strategies is really a better term, because they're simple strategies that a child can use to try to feel safer in a situation where they don't feel safe, where they feel a little frustrated or angry or upset in some way, scared. And the 5 strategies are: you can take your awareness, your attention away, you can leave, or you can bring your attention toward other people in the situation and try to get them to like you and take care of you. This is the merging pattern. The third one is, if leaving doesn't work and merging doesn't work, you can pull your energy in and go down into the ground below you to hide. You just try to endure. You try to wait for the storm to blow over, and that gives rise to the enduring pattern. The fourth one is the opposite of that. You bring your energy up in your body. You collect as much energy as possible. You throw it out at the other person, and you try to dominate them. You get aggressive to try to control them and the situation in a way that makes you feel safer. That gives rise to the aggressive pattern. And the fifth one is that you constrict your own body, your torso. You constrict the energy flow coming up through your body, and it gets thinner and faster so that you don't feel what you're feeling so much, but you can pay more attention to how you're performing. This is the good boy, good girl strategy. So I will do what you want me to do. I will be who you want me to be. I won't really check in and see how I'm feeling, but I will be a good child and the one that pleases you. And the 5 personality patterns are developed by simply using whichever of those safety strategies over and over again. Because as you use a safety strategy over and over, it gets conditioned into your body. It changes how you feel, how you think, how you imagine yourself or image yourself in the world, what you think your relationship is to other people. It creates this whole self-reinforcing cycle, which then gets conditioned into you, and it becomes an automatic reaction. So that if you get a little upset, you just do that, even if it's not a good idea in this particular situation, which is the problem most of us have as adults.
Yes.
Our old conditioning kicks in whenever we get a little unhappy.
Yeah. And so we fall into one of these patterns: the leaving pattern, merging pattern, enduring, aggressive, or rigid. But the purpose of your first book was not for somebody to just say, well, I'm just merging pattern, so that's just what I'm going to do, right? The purpose was actually what?
The purpose was to convey to other people that this is not who you are. This is not your essence. It is not your presence. It is an action that you learned to take to try to buffer yourself from feeling your distress. It's in a way a protection or a defense mechanism. It's not who you are. It's a way to try to feel safer. So instead of using this way to try to feel safer, the best advice that I can give anybody is develop the energetic skills you need to actually be present in the moment so you don't have to be caught in a pattern. And it's not exactly black and white like that, but you can learn to come out of pattern a great deal.
Yes. Yeah. I've learned a lot over the last few years since I discovered your work and other similar work. And I love how this relates to your education in physics, because really psychology, science, matter, it's all energy.
It really is. And I would posit that science or physical materialism, the belief that there is this physical plane that we live in, time and space, that's the most fundamental religion of our society. You know, it's more basic, for instance, than Christianity or Buddhism or Islam or whatever you choose. And the priesthood of that science, that physical materialism, is physics. So I wanted to go join the priesthood. And when I did that, and when I went to MIT, I would go to my physics teacher and I'd say, so, you know, what's the fundamental nature of reality? How do we know we're here? And they would say, Stephen, you can't ask those questions in science. I'm sorry, you know, this is for religion. And that was part of my thinking of, okay, this isn't working. Like, what else is there? What else is real besides matter and energy? You know, like emotion is real. Let's study that.
Yeah. I was watching a documentary a while ago about chimps, and they were following them. And it became so obvious watching this documentary. It became obvious how our emotions really are just another sensory input to help us make smart decisions.
Yeah, your body is taking in much more information from the environment than your conscious mind. And it's trying to feed that information and those suggestions up to you, up to your conscious mind, in the form of sensations and emotions.
Yeah.
But you have to learn that language in order to get the message.
Yeah. Yeah. And then find a way to reconnect with your thinking brain in the process to make sense of it. Right. And I love how your tools really do help us to keep our brain connected, right? Keep that mind body connection and not fall back into our emotional brain, our primal states of reaction.
Yes. In the second book, the How to Have Better Relationships book, I went into the idea that we actually have three centers of intelligence in the body: head center, heart center, and belly center. They're all important. They're all incredibly valuable, but they deal with different areas, different territories. And it's important to have all three online. And one of the big mistakes that most of us make is we have, you know, our favorite one, which is one we use for most things, and then we apply that even in situations where it's not the right choice.
I find it so important when I'm working with people to understand their pattern and their state, because right now, living in this age of information overload, it's so easy for people to get one size fits all advice and just think that that's the only thing. And what I keep finding is, well, for some people, they need to do more of this. For some people, they need to do less of this. Like, some people need to be more picky when they're dating. Some people need to be less picky. And so when we can really begin to see the person as an individual, what their specific patterns are, and I'm really excited with your new book to go into some of the patterns that come up between two people and their patterns.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fascinating thing to look at. And before we get to that, this also happens inside a person, because an individual typically does two patterns, not just one. You have the primary pattern, the one you go into first when you're a little upset, and then when you pass a certain threshold, you flip into a second one, and it could bring a very different kind of thinking and feeling and response than the first one does. But it's more than just you are one pattern. It's more complex than that. And then when you have two people, of course, you have two patterns in each person. Yeah. And that gets a little complicated.
Yeah. To give an example, I know my primary pattern was really easy to identify. Merging pattern, definitely. I'm all about love. I'm all about relationships. I'm definitely heart-centered. It's my blessing and sometimes my curse with the collapse cycle. And again, I don't think we mentioned this yet, but every pattern has its downside and it has its strengths and superpowers. These are not all just bad things, that these are how we survive and thrive in life. But of course, the goal is to become more consciously aware and present of what we're doing and make those choices instead of just falling into our unconscious patterns.
Yeah, and actually to develop the gifts of all 5 patterns, because they're all wonderful skills that you'll need at some point in life or even in an individual day. You know, merging pattern, heart-to-heart connection, tremendous skill. That's a wonderful thing to be able to do. And there are always moments in the day when that's a good idea.
Yep. And then I noticed my secondary pattern. It took me a little while to figure it out, but was rigid pattern. That when that doesn't work, I just go back to the books, go back to the system, the process, like what am I supposed to do? So it's been interesting even to see that struggle within myself between those two ways of looking at things, of handling things. But then, of course, taking it into relationship, it creates a whole new dynamic. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So we could take the 2 that you just talked about in yourself and talk about when you have one person who's strong in the merging pattern and another person who spends most of their time in the rigid pattern. Because you'll get the same kind of issues there. And the first one that comes to mind is that both of these patterns are ways of doing what's expected by others. Merging pattern, doing what's expected by the particular person I'm dealing with, like who do they want me to be? Because with merging pattern comes this remarkable skill of tuning into the other person's inner experience, actually feeling their feelings. This can be very surprising to people who don't do it. Feeling their feelings and knowing, what do they want from me right now? How do they want me to behave? Who do they want me to be? Wonderful skill. The part that's missing, of course, is who do I want me to be? Because the pattern doesn't emphasize tuning into yourself and noticing your own core. With the rigid pattern, you have a similar situation. Rigid pattern is not tuned into the other particular person and their feelings, but rather into all the rules and standards of society, what you've been taught by your parents, your culture, your religion, your school, whatever groups you're part of, they all have their rules and standards for how people are supposed to behave. You know, how a good girl behaves, how a good boy behaves could be a little different. But however you identify, they got rules for you. Again, very good at doing the expected thing. And for rigid pattern, it's more external performance. It's not how do you want me to feel? It's how do you want me to behave? This is a child who was taught to probably stand up straight, comb your hair, brush your teeth, say please and thank you, ask politely, don't talk with your mouth full, don't run with scissors, don't write on the walls, all that stuff.
Which seems like fair enough, good parenting to our regular standard, right?
It is, and it's necessary, but it doesn't teach you to tune into yourself and find, well, how do I feel and what do I want? So for a person caught in a rigid pattern, like if they're wondering, should I marry this person? The question will sort of morph into, should I marry this person? Which is actually a different question than, do I want to marry this person?
Yeah. It can be so hard for people with this rigid pattern to even see that they're doing everything based on everyone else, because it just feels so normal and expected. It's taught, it's praised, I think rigid is one of the more difficult because they feel like they've matured beyond some of the other old patterns and that they finally reached this pinnacle of the real understanding, when there's still a whole area of this energy work that they don't understand.
They're the 5th pattern in order developmentally. So the person is a little older. They're more like 4, 5, 6 when this gets sort of developed in the person. and they have more developmental skills, but they've lost some of the perceptual skills that a person earlier in the developmental process would have. Like a person who does leaving pattern or merging pattern is still very open energetically and psychically to what's going on those channels. Whereas a person who's in rigid pattern is probably not noticing what's going on those channels, and they're very focused on the words. So if we come back to the merging pattern and rigid pattern, two people in relationship, one problem will be communication, because the rigid pattern person will want the communication to be in words. And so they will be listening for the words and interpreting the words and not really paying attention so much to the feelings. If you think of it as a song, they're listening to the words but not the melody. Whereas the person doing merging pattern is all about the melody. It's all about the feelings. It's like, let's get a scenario. Like the merging pattern person is feeling scared and needs reassurance, and they're upset and say, but do you really love me? And this is like the fourth time we've been over this in 2 minutes. And the rigid pattern person is getting frustrated and angry. And they say, of course I do. I said I do, right? So just notice the words are, of course I do. I said I do. But the energy is anger, and it blasts the person. What the merging pattern person receives is, no, that wasn't love.
Right. That was scary and makes me want to cry.
It makes me want to cry. Exactly. Which then, the merging pattern person starts to cry, and the rigid pattern person is more frustrated. It's like, I don't know how to talk to you. And they're both doing the best they can. The problem is they're caught inside their own worlds, thinking that everyone else shares their world. Everyone else sees the whole world the same way they see it. Because we don't realize that we're not seeing the whole world, any of us. We're seeing our favorite slice of it, which could be very different from someone else's slice of it.
Yeah.
But since we only see our own slice, we don't know there are other slices.
And then add on the egoic part of believing that your way is the one and only right way. And if they don't see it your way, that they must just be.
Absolutely. The one and only right way. And the person gets very invested in being right, even when it's not important in the moment, because for them, like if they pronounce a word incorrectly, or if their hair isn't combed, or if they don't do the right thing, somehow the whole universe will be thrown out of order and terrible things will happen.
Yeah. Or like merging pattern, if someone doesn't like you, your whole world gets thrown off. And
if someone doesn't like you, and order doesn't make any difference at all. I mean, I've known people who do, for instance, merging pattern and the leaving pattern, who would get upset and a little thrown off themselves. And when they talk, they can't even form a real sentence. The words are all out of order and everything is jumbled up because inside they're all messed up. That really happens to people.
Yeah. And it's all about our emotional regulation, our physical, our energetic regulation, right? Is what it keeps coming back to.
It does. Learning to regulate yourself, that is, learning to manage your own inner state. I would posit that is the most important difference between being a child and being an adult. We expect adults to be able to manage their own inner state. When a person is a child, we don't expect them to do that. If something happens and scares them and they burst into tears, we know they can't handle this by themselves. They burst into tears, and we know they need us to put our arms around them and comfort them and say, it's okay, sweetie. Bring them in close, where our body, our regulated system, will help regulate their system. It's like two tuning forks, If they're tuned to the same note, you bong one and the other one starts to vibrate at the same tone, same. And that's how an adult who is stable and centered and emotionally regulated can help a child or anybody who is upset at the moment re-regulate themselves. It's a transmission of a coherent state.
Yes. Yeah, we co-regulate, right, with everyone around us, whether we're trying to or not.
Yeah.
We talked about a merging and rigid pattern couple where the merging person really just wants to feel softness and love and caring energy, and they might be getting bombarded with, but I love you, with this hard energy, making them want to break down, which frustrates. So each thing that the partner is doing is frustrating the other and making it worse.
Exactly. And that's the dynamic. In my therapy practice, I've realized over the years that most of the couples who come in with a long-standing repeating problem like this, an argument that never ends, the problem is they're in different patterns, and what each one does to try to feel safer makes the other one feel less safe.
Yep.
Problem.
Yeah. What about if there's I could see this with aggressive and leaving really obviously too, right?
Really obvious.
And yet, do you find that people attract are these couples really, do people usually attract people that are a different pattern than themselves? They see something they admire, they see something that completes them. Do you find that that's more common than attracting someone that's very similar to yourself?
I haven't seen any really good data on the percentage of people who attract, a given other pattern. There is a common pairing in the sense of a woman who does merging pattern because that's the most feminine of the patterns, and a man who does aggressive pattern because that's the most masculine of the patterns. And so between them, there's a lot of sexual spark. Now, the two patterns deal with life and deal with relationship very differently. So it's hard for them to get along. And very frequently, you'll hear them express this, but they'll say something like, well, we don't really get along, but man, the sex is great. And that's the glue that's holding them together, because they are operating in different worlds and they're communicating in very different ways. You can even think about it as languages, French and German and Russian and English and Spanish, maybe. If you get 5 people together who only speak their own individual language, you wouldn't expect any 2 of them to be able to communicate easily. But if everybody in the couple speaks the same language, for instance, English, and they don't realize that their inner world is so differently organized, and they're actually approaching life in different ways and on different channels of communication, they think they are speaking the same language when really they're not.
So in working with couples that are struggling with these kind of dynamics, where do you usually begin?
There's short-term and there's long-term solutions. So short-term immediate thing is to have them do their repeating fight in the office. Just, let's go through it. It'll only take 2 minutes or 5 minutes. They both know all the words, all the energies, they know it. They've been through it 100 times, if not 1,000 times. Have them do that and then start to pull apart, okay, what do you think so-and-so meant by this part? What do you think they meant by that part? The longer term solution is to help both of them, first of all, understand this map of personality so they get a sense of, wow, my way is not the only way. What a surprise. For all of us who study a map of personality, whether it's this one or the Enneagram or the Myers-Briggs or even astrology or numerology, the first discovery is, wow, my way is not the only way. Other people can be different. Big discovery. So have them make that discovery and then begin to understand what their primary and secondary patterns might be when they go into them, and then begin the process of learning the skills they need to come out of pattern. And those are the energetic basics. I go over those in both books, in the first and in the second.
Yes. Yeah. It all comes down to having our energetic basic skills and practicing that every day, right?
That's the long-term solution, because when you can hold a felt sense of core and a grounding deep into the earth and a grounding up into the cloud of divinity, when you can hold an energetic edge that protects you and shields you from energies coming into your space that you don't want, when you have a clear sense of what is me and not me, what is my problem and not my problem, when you have all those in place, it's much easier to be present in the here and now. And that's where real life is taking place. When we're caught in a pattern, we're caught in an automatic reaction, a conditioned automatic reaction that worked for us as a child in our family, but it doesn't necessarily work for us here now in this situation. I've known people, for instance, who grow up in a family where both parents did aggressive pattern, and you want to survive in this family, you better do aggressive pattern. So they do that. But you start dating somebody who doesn't do aggressive pattern, they don't like it. It's like, why are you hitting me? And the person who grew up in that family of aggressive pattern people doesn't understand that this other person is different and they don't like it. Or if you grow up in a pattern of rigid patterned people where being corrected is an act of love. You
Yeah, there's
your grammar isn't quite correct and mom lovingly says, no, sweetheart, it goes this way. Or no, you pronounce that word this way. Or your hair isn't combed, comb your hair. Now you look better. And you take this in as that means she loves me. And then you start dating in your 20s or whatever, and your sweetheart doesn't comb their hair, or they mispronounce a word, and you lovingly correct them because you believe that criticism is caring. And much to your surprise, they don't feel loved. And they say, I don't like you. I don't want this. And you think I don't understand. What's wrong? This is love. You see?
Yeah.
This is why it's important to understand all 5 of these different ways of approaching the world and be able to get another person is quite likely caught in another pattern that you don't do, and they need to be approached in a different way than you would want.
Yeah, right. The golden rule is treat others as you want to be treated, but I've heard it said that the platinum rule is treat others as they want or need to be treated.
I have not heard that, but I love it. I think that's a really good saying. Treat others as they want to be treated. Just like if you had a friend, say you speak English and your friend speaks German and they don't speak English and you want to talk to them, you better learn some German.
Mm-hmm.
If you talk to them in German, they will understand it. It's really that simple.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how this plays out in dating also, because it's one thing when you're deep in a relationship and you have these entrenched patterns, but it's so different when we're dating. And first of all, it can be really stressful dating, right? You might get rejected, you might get stood up, it might not work out, someone might offend you, someone might be crazy, they might be a murderer. There's just so many things that already launch people into dating already dysregulated, already not in their good energy space. And then we're dealing with all different types of people. So I'm curious to see if you have noticed any certain patterns or just have advice for people going out into the dating world.
The best advice I can offer is not, which patterns to look for, but rather to look for someone who seems to be able to be more present than the average bear. And for instance, for yourself, to do the inner work you need to do, which will include clearing out a great deal of old trauma so that you can be more present. So be more present and look for presence. That's good. And the other piece of advice is notice what happens during your first disagreement or your first fight. Even if it's a small thing, it probably gives you a look into what most fights between you will look like in the future. If it devolves into name calling and insults, That's probably what you're signing up for. If the two of you are able to find your way through it and actually hear what the other person is trying to communicate and understand each other and negotiate some kind of compromise or mutual decision that's both good for you, that means you'll probably be able to do that in the bigger decisions. Like, where shall we live? Or shall we have a kid? Or do we need more money? Or the small things like, what movie do we want to see? That's easier. You got less on the line.
Yeah, it takes a while to get to know someone. I'm a big fan of have a strategy, go out there. If you really want to meet your person, date lots of people, meet lots of people, be exposed to lots of people, take it really lightly and easily. Don't jump into anything too fast, because there's always somebody that you were really attracted to. And then after you got to know them, you realize that you can't be with them. You can't stand the way they are. And then all of a sudden they're not that attractive to you. And it can go the opposite too. You could meet someone that you think is very average or boring, but they continue to show up consistently, be present, be mindful, be kind. And all of a sudden the attraction can grow. So let me know if you agree. I think we base way too much on attraction these days, and that our modern dating technology and ways of being have really made that so much worse, that we just think that attraction is the end all be all and that we'll just make it work. But there's so many other compatibility factors, right, under the surface.
The swipe right, swipe left business is based on a single frame of a photograph, which tells you nothing about how they actually behave. So that's incredibly superficial. So I would agree that attraction is important and useful, but it's not more important than, can the two of you actually have a functional relationship? You'll need to have a healthy, functioning relationship, whether you're attracted to each other or not. Because if you don't have a functioning, healthy relationship, you're going to have a dysfunctional relationship the whole time, even if you're tremendously attracted to each other. So you're signing up for chaos.
And some people, that's their pattern, right? That's what's been conditioned in their body. So they're just used to it and find it again and again.
That's another really important thing, is to do the inner work to notice, what kind of family did you grow up in? If the family was chaotic, you will think, this is natural, this is normal, and this is what I'm looking for. And then you'll find it. And when somebody surprises you or disappoints you or disorients you, you'll think, we're home. Whereas if your family growing up was, say, kind and compassionate, unconsciously you'll be looking for that. That feels like home. Or in my earlier example with the aggressive pattern, if fighting all the time was what you grew up in, you'll think that that's home. So get to know what kind of family you grew up in and make some conscious choices about, is that what you want to create now in your life? You can. Harville Hendricks's book, Finding the Love You Want, from decades ago, it's based on that. Like, you have this imago, you have this image in your head of who loves me, and maybe a very dysfunctional image, but you'll think that's who you're looking for. And you'll see them across the crowded room and they'll light up and you'll go, the one for me.
Oh, yeah. I had one relationship that when I look back, he was so much like my father. And I was so drawn to him. I even broke up with him because I knew it wasn't going to be good, but I couldn't stop thinking about him for like 9 months. And I reached back out and we got back together, and I wasn't ready to let it go until I learned the lesson I needed to learn.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people nowadays think that they're twin flames or soulmates. And it's really, it's trauma bonding, or it's that thing that we have to go through to learn the skill that we didn't learn growing up.
Yeah. And we do have an inner desire to finally get it right this time. There was the train wreck. Dad didn't love me the way I needed to be loved. And then we go looking for the same kind of situation to try to finally get Dad to love me. Yeah. It's very attractive. So that can be trauma bonding versus I do think there are such things as soulmates, but it doesn't, in my understanding, it doesn't get your system all revved up the same way. When you encounter trauma, your system revs up in some way to deal with it. Whereas someone who really is comfortable, things calm down. You feel comfortable inside.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think some relationships can evolve through that process.
Sure. If both people are willing to do the inner work.
That growth mindset is probably the most important thing to look for in a partner, right? Because people do change, people do evolve, and they can either unconsciously do it or do it consciously.
I would say it's important to look for if you have a growth mindset. But one of the things that I have learned, to my great chagrin over many years, is that most people actually do not have a growth mindset. Most people just want it to stay the same way. So if you want that, you're looking for another person who also wants it to stay the same way. I remember being part of a study on relationships decades ago in which they were measuring that tendency in people, the tendency to want to grow. And one of the things they found was that the match in how much you want to grow or how little you want to grow was the most important factor in determining whether you're going to be happy together. Mm. One of you really wants to grow and change and wants the other one to do it with them, and the other one doesn't want to. That's a real disagreement. It can be just as big a disagreement as over having kids or smoking or something like that.
Wow. Yeah, I could see that. And then one other question I haven't asked you about yet is around masculine and feminine energy and polarity. Yeah. And you mentioned, the most feminine pattern and the most masculine pattern tend to go together. Do you find that this masculine-feminine polarity is a big factor in whether a relationship comes together, whether it works out?
Well, first of all, we want to state for everybody listening that every person is able to run both masculine and feminine energy. Generally, more masculine energy on the right side of the body, more feminine energy on the left side of the body. And if you're living in a female body, the body physically is better at running female or feminine energy. If you're living in a masculine body, the body is more adapted to running masculine energy. But that's not an absolute. There are many happy, successful couples in which the woman runs more masculine energy and the man runs more feminine energy. And that difference provides a spark between them. The value of having a difference is that it does provide a spark, a sexual spark. Now that's different from having a relationship that's actually functional and healthy in all the other parts of life. But the sexual spark is something people like. So, you can lean into that or not as you wish. But it's important to know that a person can consciously regulate how much they're running. I'm sure you, as most women, are very well aware that if they're, say, in a public place and they don't want attention from men, they can kind of shield their feminine energy and kind of tone it. It's like turning the light down, right? And just get by without attracting a lot of guys. In another situation, you're in a public place or maybe you're at a party and there's a guy you really want to attract. You turn that right up, or you're on a date with somebody. You turn it up, you let it shine because that's what you're doing now. And in my experience, the masculine energy is more action. It doesn't shine the way the feminine energy does. It's attractive, but it's dynamic attractive, whereas the feminine is more magnetic, which is one reason why we have this old thing about, the boy is supposed to ask the girl out. The one with the more masculine energy will typically initiate, but the one with the more feminine energy has been busy turning up the light to make it happen.
Yeah. And it's always so tricky getting into this because while there are these kind of standards, there's also always exceptions, right? So I always look at it like, let me help people understand the laws of nature. What you do with it and how it applies to you might be a little different, but it helps to understand, right? Yeah, I love that. I have my giveaway on my website is how to get more in real life dates from dating apps, because that's one of the biggest challenges that I hear is it's endless swiping and texting without actually meeting and going on a date. And so I give women these tips and tools to drop the handkerchief, so to speak, to show that if you do get asked out, that you'll say yes, so that a woman can get asked out without being the one in the masculine if she doesn't want to be, to ask him out, but more like, hey, I bet if you asked me out, I'd say yes.
Yeah, to drop the handkerchief, to smile. It's like, here's a little skin.
Yeah, magnetic, draw it in.
I mean, there's a lot of research that demonstrates that the more skin a woman is showing, the more men notice.
Yep. And yet online, we don't want to see a guy showing all his skin, right? Guys with the shirtless pics often don't do that well. So it's really interesting.
Put up a picture of their genitals. It's like, this is not the idea, guy.
No.
Your target audience's favorite thing. We'll get to that.
Yeah. So I help people through the dating process, but I think when they come to me, they think it's going to be all strategy and all tactical and maybe a little bit of healing or energetic work. But what we end up doing is a lot of the healing and energetic work and going through their past and releasing these unwanted programming, conditioned responses in them, and help them see a vision for the future relationship that they want, not just who their ideal person is, but really what's that ideal relationship? Because that's the thing that you get to co-create.
Yeah, you get to work on yourself and become the kind of person that your perfect person would want. Yeah. But almost everything that a person wants and can't get, the obstacle is some kind of old trauma, beliefs, limiting beliefs. It's a lot of personal, psychological, traumatic stuff that's in the way.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, for being here, for all of the amazing information and knowledge and practices that you've put out into the world. I support your mission, and I'm happy to be exposing more people to your work because I think that it's so important.
I completely agree. And I'm very grateful to you for all the work you do to spread the word on this. My hope is, if everybody in the world learns to see other people this way, there'll be a lot fewer arguments and a lot fewer wars, because people won't start from the unconscious belief, my way is the only way. And by the way, my way is the right way. It's like, well, okay, so what's your way and how do we negotiate this? Maybe the whole world can get better if enough of us are doing this work.
That'd be amazing. Thank you. And they can find you at the5personalitypatterns.com.
That's right. Okay. There's information on the patterns. There's a whole blog. There's a lot of different stuff. There's several courses a person can sign up to take if they want.
Yes. And your new book is called?
How to Have Better Relationships.
Awesome. I can't wait to read it. I just ordered it.
Yeah, it's available now at bookstores and via Amazon.
And you haven't done audiobooks, have you?
I did an audiobook of the first one, of the 5 personality patterns.
Okay, because I'm a big audiobook fan, but if it's something I'm going to go back and reference again, like I have this, I'm all about having a hard copy.
I think a lot of people, even people who really love listening to it, also want a hard copy because they want to highlight stuff or dog-ear the pages or, whatever their method is.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you again for being here. Good luck on your next trip to Europe.
Leaving there soon to teach this material to executive coaches in Europe. I'm looking forward to that.
All right. Well, thanks again. Cheers to all of us having better relationships.
I'm in for that. Thank you much.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Love Coach in My Pocket, where we talk about love, dating, relationships, healing, and all sorts of topics related to these. Don't forget also to download the Love Coach in My Pocket app from the App Store for tons of free resources to support you on your journey.